The Curse of the Wooden House Prologue, The House and the Unsolved Mystery. Every countryside has its own ghost stories passed down from generation to generation, but the story of the wooden house in Tramm village is almost legendary. The house lies deep within the forest, where sunlight rarely filters through the dense and ancient trees. To the villagers, it isn't just an abandoned house, but a place harboring a dark curse. The house had once been the site of an unsolved crime. The family who owned it, Mr. Thomas, his wife, and their youngest daughter, Anna, were brutally murdered on a stormy night. They were found lifeless inside the wooden house, their bodies bearing strange wounds that no one could explain. The police searched everywhere but couldn't find the culprit. The house was abandoned afterward, and no one dared approach it since. But the story doesn't end there. Rumor has it that on full moon nights, if you listen closely from the direction of the wooden house, you can hear the sound of footsteps, the faint crying of a young girl, and sometimes desperate screams. Everything would have faded into oblivion if not for the mysterious death of a young man named Harry from the village. He was found dead right in front of the wooden house just weeks after he dared to challenge the curse and enter the house in the middle of the night. Harry's death sent the village into a state of panic. Could there be a supernatural force behind all these deaths? Or is there a killer still free out there? Don't forget to like and subscribe to the LDT Group channel for more terrifying stories and to join us in unraveling this dark mystery. Chapter 1: Stepping into the Darkness. Our investigative team was sent to Tramm village after Harry's death. The team included myself, David, the team leader with over 15 years of experience investigating mysterious cases, along with my colleagues, Sarah and John, both exceptional at analyzing situations. As soon as we arrived in the village, I sensed a dark, heavy atmosphere hanging over everything. The villagers avoided us when we asked about the wooden house. They whispered among themselves, their eyes filled with fear when they mentioned Mr. Thomas's name. Mrs. Martha, the old lady who lived closest to the house, was the first person we spoke to. "You all should stay away from that house," Mrs. Martha said, her eyes darting nervously toward the path leading into the forest. "Anyone who steps into that place will never come back the same." "We're here to find the truth, ma'am," I replied, trying to reassure her. "Can you tell us more? What really happened to Mr. Thomas's family?" Mrs. Martha hesitated for a moment, then sighed, her voice low and somber. "The Thomas family didn't die naturally. There's something in that house, something we shouldn't touch. There were signs before they died, but no one believed them. Now, every night, their souls still wander in the woods. As for Harry, he brought death upon himself when he dared to defy the forbidden." Are you finding this story more intriguing? Don't forget to like and subscribe to LDT Group so you won't miss out on more chilling mysteries and investigations with us. Chapter 2: The First Clues. The next morning, we decided to enter the wooden house. It was a gloomy morning, the sky gray and devoid of light. The path into the forest narrowed as we ventured deeper. Cold winds whispered through the trees, carrying with them faint, indecipherable murmurs. As we approached the house, an overwhelming sense of unease enveloped us. The house stood there, silent and decaying, like a wild beast stalking its prey. The front door was shattered, the windows broken, and the walls outside were covered in moss. The air was thick, as if time had stopped on that fateful night. John and I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of mold and rot hit us, making it hard to breathe. The house was empty, with peeling walls and scattered old wooden furniture. But what caught my attention were the strange footprints on the floor, small, like those of a child, leading directly to a room at the end of the hallway. We followed the trail, each step creaking on the rotting wooden floor. The door to the room creaked open as I nudged it, revealing a chilling sight. The room was filled with portraits. Every single one was of a young girl, Anna, the youngest daughter of Mr. Thomas. In each painting, her eyes stared straight at us, as if she were watching our every move. Sarah, the sharpest in our group, pointed out that in some of the paintings, Anna's face appeared oddly different. Her eyes were pitch black, her lips pressed tight, as if holding back a terrible secret. Is this story creeping you out? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to LDT Group to stay updated on the most eerie stories and join us as we uncover the truth. Chapter 3. Voices in the Night. We decided to camp near the house to continue our investigation, feeling that something was not quite right. As night fell, the sky turned pitch black. The firelight barely illuminated a small area around us, while the rest was engulfed in chilling, suffocating darkness. Around midnight, as I sat on guard, a strange sound came from within the house. It was the soft patter of footsteps, as if someone was walking inside. I stood up, startled, listening more carefully. The footsteps stopped, but then came a ghostly giggle, like that of a young girl. "I heard something," I whispered to Sarah, who had woken up from the noise. Both of us decided to check inside the house, even though every instinct told us not to. We stepped inside, our flashlights cutting through the pitch-black hallway. Nothing moved, and everything was eerily silent, but the atmosphere had grown even heavier. Suddenly, a cold gust brushed past me, carrying an odd scent. I turned around, and for a brief moment, I saw a faint figure, a young girl in a white dress, staring right at me from the end of the hallway. Her eyes were empty, filled with despair. We raised our flashlights higher, but the figure vanished instantly, as if it had never been there. My heart raced, but I knew we had just seen something not of this world. If you're finding this story unsettling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to LDT Group for more spine-chilling tales, and join us in our pursuit of the truth. Chapter 4. Clues from Mrs. Martha. The next morning, we returned to the village to speak with Mrs. Martha again. I recounted what we had seen and asked if there was anything she hadn't told us about the Thomas family and their deaths. Mrs. Martha sat in silence for a while, her eyes distant. "Perhaps it's time to tell the truth," she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. Anna, the youngest daughter, wasn't an ordinary girl. From a young age, she showed strange behavior. She often whispered to someone in the dark, and many nights I heard her footsteps walking around the house, even though she was supposed to be asleep. Mrs. Martha revealed that Mr. Thomas had tried to hide Anna's unusual behavior, but it was his wife, Mrs. Mary, who knew the most about their daughter's secret. Mrs. Mary had confided in a few close friends, saying that Anna had the ability to see things others couldn't, but no one believed her. What chilled us the most was when Mrs. Martha mentioned an event that occurred a few weeks before the family's death. One evening, she heard loud arguing from the Thomas house. As she got closer, she heard Anna sobbing, followed by Mrs. Mary's frantic scream, "What have you done? What have you called here?" Is this story becoming more mysterious and eerie? Don't forget to like and follow LDT Group to ensure you don't miss out on the next part of this haunting and unsettling tale. Chapter 5. The Death of Mrs. Mary. We decided to dig deeper into Mrs. Mary's past and what she had experienced before her death. After speaking with some villagers, we learned that Mrs. Mary had become very strange in the weeks leading up to the massacre. She often locked the doors, wouldn't let anyone inside, and even forbade the maid from going near Anna. I began to suspect that Mrs. Mary might have played a role in her family's deaths. Perhaps she had uncovered a terrible secret about her daughter and had caused the tragedy. But what really happened that night And was there something else behind it all? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to LDT Group for more spine-chilling updates as we continue to unravel this mystery. Chapter 6: The Killer. The deeper our investigation went, the more we realized that the truth was more than just supernatural. While the eerie occurrences in the wooden house were terrifying, there was a far more cold and brutal conspiracy hidden beneath. Sarah discovered that Harry, the young man who had recently died, had a secret relationship with Anna. This might explain why he dared to enter the house that fateful night. Perhaps he had uncovered a horrifying secret leading to his death. But who was the real culprit? Everything seemed so complex, and we still had many unanswered questions. Chapter 7: Secrets in the Forest. After learning of Harry's relationship with Anna, things became even more complicated. Why did Harry die at the doorstep of the wooden house? How was he connected to the death of the Thomas family? Why were the villagers so terrified of that house? Sarah, John, and I decided to return to the forest near the house the next afternoon to search for more clues. According to local rumors, the forest around the wooden house was always mysterious. They said that on full moon nights, strange cries and laughter could be heard from deep within the woods. As we ventured deeper, an indescribable feeling overtook us. The air was unnaturally cold, even though it was midsummer. The trees were silent, with only the occasional creak of dry branches underfoot breaking the eerie stillness. We reached an area where the branches appeared broken and the ground bore strange marks, as if someone had been frequenting the spot. Sarah crouched down, carefully inspecting the tracks, and realized they might belong to a woman. The footprints led deeper into the forest, straight to a small cave hidden under a large tree. Inside the cave, we found an old, dusty notebook with yellowed pages. On the cover, the name Anna was written in neat handwriting. We opened the book and found strange writings, sometimes lamentations, other times lines that seemed to be conversations with someone else. One passage in particular sent chills down our spines. They don't understand me, but he does. Harry promised he would help me. He said he would take me away from here, but I know I can't leave. They won't let me go. They'll kill us both if they find out. We exchanged glances. Anna and Harry had planned to escape, but it seemed something had happened. Could their attempt to flee have led to their deaths? Chapter 8: The Curse from the Past. We continued flipping through the notebook, and near the end, Sarah stopped, her eyes wide with horror. The writing wasn't Anna's. It belonged to someone else, likely Mrs. Mary, Anna's mother. The handwriting was shaky, filled with fear and madness. "They've returned. I've done everything I can to stop it, but I can't undo what's been started. Anna is no longer the girl I once knew. She's been taken over, and I don't know how to save her. I called for the priest, but he said it was too late." The words read like a confession from a mother helpless to save her daughter. I began to realize that the Thomas family's deaths were not just a simple massacre. A dark curse, perhaps rooted in the family's past, had resurfaced, and somehow Anna had become its victim. Sarah continued reading, her voice trembling. That night, I heard her talking to someone. I opened the door and saw her standing in front of the mirror, but the reflection wasn't her. Something else, something dark, was using her form. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to end it before it was too late. Chapter 9: The Fateful Night. We returned to the wooden house that night, bringing the notebook and everything we had discovered. I knew that if we didn't act soon, more deaths could follow. Mrs. Mary's writings indicated that she had tried to stop something terrible. Perhaps she had learned the truth about Anna, but instead of saving her daughter, she had been drawn into the curse. As we entered the house, the air seemed to thicken. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, creating eerie sounds. Suddenly, deep within the house, we heard the soft patter of footsteps, followed by strange whispers. John and I moved towards the sound, our flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. Each step seemed to be swallowed by the surrounding blackness. The door at the end of the hallway swung open, and I knew we were about to face something terrifying. In the dim light, a figure slowly emerged. It was Anna, or rather, something that had taken her form. Her black, hollow eyes stared straight at us, filled with hatred and despair. She stood there silently, her gaze piercing. "You cannot save her," a voice echoed, not from Anna, but from the shadows behind her. "She's been ours for a long time." Suddenly, Anna's figure vanished, and the space around us began to distort. The walls seemed to move, closing in on us, trapping us in endless darkness. Chapter 10. The Curse Sealed. In that moment of terror, I remembered what I had read in Mrs. Mary's notebook. She had tried to stop it, but perhaps there was one final way to end it all, by breaking the ritual the Thomas family had been practicing for generations. I shouted to Sarah, "The notebook! It has instructions to break the curse." Sarah quickly flipped to the last pages, where there were notes on how to seal the spirits and end the cycle of death. We needed an item belonging to Anna, along with forbidden rites that Mrs. Mary had recorded. I looked around, searching for something connected to Anna. In the empty room, there was only a small bracelet lying beneath an old table. I picked it up, feeling the cold emanating from the object. Sarah and John began performing the ritual based on the instructions, while I held the bracelet tightly. The darkness around us seemed to press in, but we couldn't stop. The spirit's scream echoed through the house, a final warning. Chapter 11. The Horrifying Conclusion. As the ritual neared its end, the atmosphere grew unbearably tense. Everything seemed on the verge of exploding. The entire house shook violently, the doors slamming as if controlled by an invisible force. Suddenly our flashlights went out, and we were plunged into complete darkness. 1 second, 2 seconds, then suddenly, everything went silent. The wind stopped howling, the house stopped shaking, and Anna's spirit no longer cried out. It felt as though everything had ended, but I wasn't sure. We slowly got up, fumbling to turn our flashlights back on. When the light returned, the room was empty. No sign of Anna, no more whispers. The curse had been broken. Chapter 12. The Final Truth. As we left the wooden house, I knew that the story didn't end here. The deaths of the Thomas family weren't caused just by the curse, but by a combination of ambition, hatred, and the dark secrets the family had hidden for so long. Later, we discovered that Harry, the young man who had died at the house, was not merely a victim. He had known too much about the Thomas family's secrets and had tried to free Anna. But in discovering the horrifying truth, Harry paid the ultimate price with his life. As for the Thomas family, they were destroyed by the very thing they had created, a curse from which there was no escape. The curse may have been sealed, but the terrifying memories of the wooden house will haunt us forever. Have you faced your fears? Don't forget to like and follow LDT Group to make sure you don't miss out on more terrifying and haunting stories.